Welcome to part 3 of my review of Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. In part 1 we covered the new subrace options, in part 2 we covered the new subclass options. In this video we are going to talk about the new spells that the new subclasses get specifically. As always, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more reviews on this book as well as videos on all things D&D, be sure to subscribe. And if you want to have a more in-depth conversation on everything Wildemount or all things D&D, be sure to drop by my Twitch stream. I stream every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, link to that in the description below. So let's jump right in. Now, as I brought up before, it is an important note that these Dunamancy spells are meant specifically for the two new wizard subclasses, the Chronomancy Wizard and the Graviturgy Wizard. These spells are available to the wizard subclasses previously mentioned in this chapter, as well as other spellcasting classes with the Dungeon Master's consent. More on that in a second. Now, a lot of these spells are based on screwing with the space-time continuum, which going further in, you'll see exactly what that looks like. First, we should bring up Dunamancy for non-Dunamancers. Basically, there's some lore information here on why they should not be existent outside of the Wildemount section, but it does say that Dunamancy spells are readily available to the wizard subclasses and should not be added to the full spell list of other spellcasting classes. However, the DM could consider allowing other spellcasting classes opportunities throughout the campaign to learn a handful of Dunamancy-themed spells as something like quest rewards. Basically, it's up to your DM to allow you to use these spells if you do not pick one of the new subclass options available. Without wasting any more time, let's jump right in. We're going to go through these in alphabetical order, and I'm going to rate them by usefulness on a 1 to 5 scale, which will include things like the damage rating, how late you get them in your character, and generally how useful these spells could be in multiple scenarios. So getting started right away, we see the first one. We have our first new spell, Darkstar. An 8th level evocation spell, 1 action casting time with a range of 150 feet, and the duration is up to 1 minute with concentration. The spell creates a sphere centered on a point you choose within range. The sphere can have a radius of up to 40 feet. The area within this sphere is filled with magical darkness and crushing gravitational force. For the duration, the spell's area is difficult terrain. A creature with dark vision can't see through magical darkness, and non-magical light can't illuminate it. No sound can be created within or pass through the area. Any creature or object entirely inside the sphere is immune to thunder damage, and creatures are deafened while entirely inside it. Casting a spell that includes a verbal component is impossible there. That's a nice touch. Any creature that enters the spell's area for the first time on a turn or starts it there must make a Constitution saving throw. The creature takes 8d10 force damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. A creature reduced to 0 hit points by this damage is disintegrated. A disintegrated creature and everything it is wearing and is carrying except magic items are reduced to a pile of fine gray dust. Now, the important thing to note with this spell is regardless of any creature's saving throw outcome, this is always going to be difficult terrain for anything inside of it. So if you center this on a cluster of enemies with a 40-foot radius, they could take 1 or even possibly 2 turns to get out of it, using their entire turn to take dash actions through difficult terrain. However, it's also important to note that this affects every single creature, so trying to use this in the middle of a combat encounter is going to be likely lethal to your teammates as well as the enemies inside of it. So this seems like a really good opener for combat more than anything else, which is still really nice. However, again, getting this at level 8 is really far into a campaign. This is a level 15 spell. The usefulness and damage potential is through the roof, but getting it that late is unlikely to happen. So with that, I'm going to give this spell a 4 out of 5. Really good potential, get it a little bit too late. For the next spell, we have Fortune's Favor, a 2nd level divination spell with a casting time of 1 minute and a range of 60 feet that lasts for 1 hour. It does cost 100 GP to cast though. You impart latent luck to yourself or one willing creature you can see within range. When the chosen creature makes an attack roll, an ability check or saving throw before the spell ends, it can dismiss this spell on itself to roll an additional d20 and choose which one to use. Alternatively, when an attack roll is made against the chosen creature, it can dismiss the spell on itself to roll a d20 and choose which of the d20s to use, one rolled or the one the attacker rolled. If the original roll has advantage or disadvantage, the creature rolls the additional d20 after advantage or disadvantage has been applied to the original roll. When you cast the spell using a 3rd level slot or higher, you can target 1 additional creature. The way I'm looking at this is you trade a 2nd level spell slot and 100 gold to give a creature advantage or disadvantage on literally anything once. Now, is that good? I think so. I think since Wizards already get an insane amount of spell slots, I think being able to just call advantage or disadvantage on yourself or any of your allies or any of your enemies at any time is extremely powerful in almost any scenario, and getting it at level 2 and getting it as a second level spell means you get this super early. I think that this is really good in almost any scenario, and it's going to get a 5 out of 5. For the next spell, we have Gift of Alacrity, a first level divination spell with a casting time of 1 minute. You have to be in touch range to cast. Duration of 8 hours. You touch a willing creature. For the duration, the target can add 1d8 to its initiative rolls. Now, because you're already using this as your Chronomancy wizard class, you already get to add your intelligence to your initiative rolls as well as your dexterity. And if you cast this on yourself for pretty much the entire day, because you're going to probably have multiple encounters within that 8-hour period, likely, you're essentially always going to go first in initiative if you just cast this on yourself once a day using a first level spell. It has no actual monetary cost to it. Also, being able to cast this on your allies as well, if you want them to happen to go first, costing only a first level spell slot. This is really powerful, 5 out of 5. For the next spell, we have Gravity Fissure, a 6th level evocation, casting time 1 action, range self in a 100-foot line. The duration is instantaneous. You manifest a ravine of gravitational energy in a line originating from you that is 100 feet long and 5 feet wide. Each creature in that line must make a Constitution saving throw, taking 8d8 force damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. Each creature within 10 feet of the line but not in it must succeed a Constitution saving throw or take 8d8 force damage and be pulled toward the line until the creature is in its area. At higher levels, when you cast this spell using a 7th level or higher spell slot, the damage increases for 1d8 for each slot above 6th. Pretty standard there. So this is like trick shot the spell, where you have to like line up multiple enemies to get this to do a lot for a 6th level spell. Now, unfortunately, because of the way it's worded, it's each creature, not each hostile creature. So if each of your allies are in that 10-foot range around the fissure, they're going to be taking a lot of damage along with this. So this is kind of hard to use unless every enemy is clustered together and all of your allies are behind you. I'd have to see this in action to get a more accurate reading on this, but just reading it, it seems a little bit too risky and not necessarily good enough since it can hurt everything. I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 5. For the next spell, we have Gravity Sinkhole, a 4th level evocation, 1 action casting time, range of 120 feet, and an instantaneous duration. A 20-foot spear of crushing force forms at a point you can see within range and tugs at the creatures there. Each creature in the sphere must take a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes 5d10 force damage and is pulled in a straight line toward the center of the sphere, ending in an unoccupied space as close to the center as possible, even if that space is in the air. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage and isn't pulled. At higher levels, when you cast it using 5th level spell slot higher, the damage increases by 1d10 for each slot above 4th. This is essentially a less powerful version of the 8th level spell listed above, the Darkstar. It's almost half as much damage. However, having the creatures get pulled into the center means that they will likely have to take multiple turns to get out of it and get over to you. However, being able to pull the enemies in with this spell with a 20-foot radius means you can hamper their progress of getting towards you or your allies, still dealing a good amount of damage. And 4th level is a pretty low barrier to entry for this spell. I think this has a really good utility, and it's not super large that you're going to hurt all of your allies as well, like the Darkstar. I like this one, 4 out of 5. Immovable Object. 2nd level transmutation, casting time 1 action, touch range with a duration of 1 hour. You touch an object that weighs no more than 10 pounds and cause it to become magically fixed in place. You and the creatures you designate when you cast the spell can move the object normally. You can also set a password that when spoken within 5 feet of the object suppresses the spell for 1 minute. If the object is fixed in the air, it can hold up to 4,000 pounds of weight. More weight causes the object to fall. A creature can use an action to make a strength check against your spell save DC. On a success, the creature can move the object up to 10 feet. If you cast a spell using a spell slot level of 4th or 5th level, the DC to move the object increases by 5. It can carry up to 8,000 pounds, and the duration increases to 24 hours. If you cast this spell using a spell slot of 6th level or higher, the DC to move increases by 10. It can carry up to 20,000 pounds, and the effect is permanent until dispelled. Looking at this spell, I'm imagining a scenario of like setting up a trap of a several 1,000-pound object like above a door where enemies or a boss is going to come out of. You just set up 4,000 or 8,000 pounds worth of just solid material, and then boss enters the room or enemies go below it. You say the word and they get hit suddenly you have Wile E. Coyote getting hit by the anvil on the head. I can't really think of any other uses for this, except maybe to like block a door if you're trying to escape. But I think this has more comical uses out of it than actual useful uses out of it. But it's still funny. It's second level, costs almost nothing to cast. 3 out of 5. Next up, we have Magnify Gravity, a first level transmutation with a casting time of 1 action, range of 60 feet, and 1 round duration, so 6 seconds. The gravity in a 10-foot sphere centered on a point you can see within range increases for a moment. Each creature in the sphere on the turn in which you cast the spell must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes 2d8 force damage. Its speed is halved until the end of its next turn. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage and suffers no reduction to its speed. Until the start of your next turn, any object that isn't being worn or carried in the sphere requires a successful strength check against your spell save DC to pick up or move. When you cast a spell using a slot of second level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8. So this is like a smaller version of the Darkstar, kind of. You just get a bigger and bigger object that you can manifest, like, at range. First level spell, 2d8 force damage, and having possibly a bunch of creatures in a 10-foot radius is speed. That's pretty nice for level 1, and it doesn't have any monetary cost to it. So this is pretty nice, 4 out of 5. Pulse Wave, third level evocation, casting time 1 action, range self in a 30-foot cone, duration instantaneous. You create intense pressure, unleashing it in a 30-foot cone and decide whether the pressure pushes or pulls creatures and objects. Each creature in that cone must make a Constitution saving throw. A creature takes 66 force damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one, and every creature that fails the save is either pulled 15 feet toward you or pushed 15 feet away from you, depending on the choice you made for the spell. In addition, unsecured objects that are completely within the cone are likewise pulled or pushed 15 feet. When you cast a spell using a 4th level or higher spell slot, the damage increases by 1d6 and the distance pulled or pushed increases by 5 feet for each level above 3rd. So 6d6 force damage on a level 3 spell, that's almost as good as Fireball. But getting the additional push or pull away, again, hampers enemy progress, still dealing a ton of damage. And in the right scenario, you could throw a bunch of creatures like off of a cliff or something, or throw a bunch of objects into other creatures, dealing more damage, again, should that type of situation arise. Overall, this is really nice. It's good utility, it's good damage, a little bit less than, you know, the go-to level 3 spell Fireball, but still a nice spell overall, 4 out of 5. Next up, we have our first 9th level spell, Ravenous Void. Casting time 1 action, range 1,000 feet, concentration up to 1 minute. You create a 20-foot sphere of destructive gravitational force centered on a point you can see within 1,000 feet of you. For the spell's duration, the sphere and any space within 100 feet of it are difficult terrain, and non-magical objects fully inside the sphere are destroyed if they aren't being worn or carried. When the sphere appears at the start of each of your turns and until the spell ends, unsecured objects within 100 feet of the sphere are pulled toward the sphere's center, ending in an unoccupied space as close to the center as possible. A creature that starts its turn within 100 feet of the sphere must succeed on a strength saving throw or be pulled straight towards the sphere's center, ending in an unoccupied space as close to the center as possible. A creature that enters the sphere for the first time on its turn or starts its turn there takes 5d10 force damage and is restrained until it is no longer in the sphere. If the sphere is in the air, the restrained creature hovers inside the sphere. A creature can use its action to make a strength check against your spell save DC, ending its restrained condition on itself or another creature inside that sphere that it can reach. A creature reduced to 0 hit points by this spell is annihilated along with any non-magical items it is wearing or carrying. So right away, looking at this spell, this is completely wipe an entire encounter the spell. Having a 1,000 foot range means you don't have to go anywhere near combat. Having a pull range of 200 foot diameter means every single thing is going to get pulled in if it fails the save. And if it succeeds the save, it still has to get out of that 100-foot radius and continue making more saves to not get immediately pulled to the center. Statistically, that's really hard to do considering it's also difficult terrain, meaning they're moving at maybe 30 feet. If they go in a straight line out, they'll probably have to take at least 3 turns to get out of the range of being pulled, making at least 3, possibly 4 strength saving throws to not get immediately pulled into the center, constantly taking 5d10 force damage if they do get pulled in at least once, and should they get pulled to the center, they just get immediately restrained with no additional save, meaning that on their turn they will have to use their action to attempt to undo the restraining condition, meaning they get even less time and movement to get out of the sphere's range. This spell just single-handedly ends almost all encounters before they could even begin, but it is at 9th level. At that point, you're level 17, you should be kind of overpowered at that point, but still, I think that this spell is really cool. 9th level is a long ways away, but just all of the utility of this spell is just extremely powerful. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5. Next up, we have Reality Break, an 8th level conjuration spell with a casting time of 1 action, range of 60 feet, and a duration of 1 minute with concentration. You shatter the barriers between realities and timelines, thrusting a creature into turmoil and madness. The target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw, or it can't take reactions until the spell ends. The affected target must also roll a d10 at the start of each of its turns. The number roll determines what happens to the target as shown on the Reality Break effects table. At the end of each of its turns, the target can repeat the wisdom saving throw, ending the spell in a success. So for the table of Reality Break effects, we have on a 1 to 2, Vision of the Far Realm, the target takes 6d12 psychic damage and it is stunned until the end of its next turn. 3 to 5 is Rending Rift, the target must make a dexterity saving throw taking 8d12 force damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. 6 through 8 we have Wormhole, the target is teleported along with everything it is wearing and carrying up to a 30 feet in an unoccupied space that you can see of your choice. The target also takes 10d12 force damage and is knocked prone. Chill of the Dark Void, the target takes 10d12 cold damage and is blinded until the start of its next turn. Now overall, the only thing about this spell is that it can basically be immediately nullified by the target just succeeding on a save and nothing happening to it. If the target succeeds just 1 wisdom save, then you essentially just burned an 8th level spell for nothing. These effects are really cool, but the super high risk of casting an 8th level spell that can just be fizzled out by a successful wisdom save and having no effects whatsoever is a little bit weak. The effects are powerful, but getting there is too risky. I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. Now we move on to our first cantrip of the spell list, the Sapping Sting. Casting time 1 action, range 30 feet, duration instantaneous. You sap the vitality of 1 creature you can see in range. Target must succeed on a Constitution saving throw or take 1d4 necrotic damage and fall prone. The spell's damage increases by 1d4 when you reach 5th level, 11th level, and 17th level. I really don't see you casting this at 17th level. Just doing 4d4 necrotic damage is a little bit weak. You're that high level. I don't know. I feel like this could have done more. I think if you did something like gain temporary hit points equal to the damage dealt would make this better. Otherwise, this should be at least 1d6 or possibly 1d8 if they have to make a con save as well. Otherwise, it does nothing. I don't know. This seems really weak. I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5. Next up, we have Temporal Shunt. 5th level transmutation, casting time 1 reaction, taken when a creature you can see makes an attack roll or starts to cast a spell, range 120 feet and a duration of 1 round. You target the triggering creature, which must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or vanish, being thrown to another point in time and causing the attack to miss or spell to be wasted. At the start of its next turn, the target reappears where it was or in the closest unoccupied space. The target doesn't remember you casting the spell or being affected by it. Interesting point there. When you cast this spell using a slot of 6th level or higher, you can target 1 additional creature for each slot above 5th. The targets must be within 30 feet of each other. Now for a 5th level spell, this essentially functions like a counter spell, but also applies to normal attacks for 2 additional spell levels higher. However, important to note with this spell is that you don't have to roll if the target casts a spell higher than this spell's level, like you would have to for counterspell. Like if a target casts a 6th level spell and you cast counterspell at a 3rd level, you'd have to like roll to see if you even counterspell it. This just seems to auto succeed regardless of what they cast. It also applies to attacks. I think this is double or even quadruple the range of counterspell. I think this spell is very utilitarian. You have to invest a lot to use it though, but I think that's fine. This spell could see a lot of play. A lot of really clutch uses could come out of this one. But again, if they succeed a save, you just burned a 5th level spell slot and nothing happened. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. Next up, we have Tether Essence, a 7th level necromancy. Casting time 1 action, range 60 feet. Costs 250 gold to use, which the spell consumes. Duration is concentration up to 1 hour. 2 creatures you can see within range must make a Constitution saving throw with disadvantage if they are within 30 feet of each other. Each creature can willingly fail the save. If either save succeeds, the spell has no effect. If both saves fail, the creatures are magically linked for the duration. Regardless of the distance between them, when damage is dealt to one of them, the same damage is dealt to the other. If hit points are restored to one of them, the same number of hit points are restored to the other. If either of the tethered creatures is reduced to 0 hit points, the spell ends on both. If the spell ends on one creature, it ends on both. This spell is strange. There's a lot of potential uses that you could get with this, but 7th level just to link creatures together where they share hit points. I think there are other abilities that do this elsewhere. A 7th level necromancy to do just this. And if you're trying to use this on enemies, both of them have to fail their saves, which is really risky. Doing this to allies makes sense if you're trying to heal two people at the same time. But again, that's 7th level. That's really high. I don't really like this. It seems way too risky with not enough reward. If you use this on enemies and allies, it doesn't seem like you could get enough of a use out of this to warrant the 7th level cast or using up that much gold. I'm going to give this a 1 out of 5. The next 9th level spell we have here is Time Ravage. Casting time 1 action, range of 90 feet, duration instantaneous. However, it costs an hourglass filled with diamond dust worth at least 5,000 gold, which the spell consumes. You target a creature you can see within range, putting its physical form through the devastation of rapid aging. Target must make a Constitution saving throw, taking 10d12 necrotic damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. If the save fails, the target also ages to the point where it only has 30 days left before it dies of old age. In this age state, the target has disadvantage on attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws, and its walking speed is halved. Only the Wish spell or casting Greater Restoration at 9th level can end these effects and restore the target to its previous age. Now, this doesn't seem like a spell that players would use often. However, you could do something really clever if you're running a campaign and like the BBEG casts this on one of the party members, and then there becomes a race against time quest for your party to figure out how to stop this within 30 days or the character dies. I think you could do something really clever if you're running this spell in your game as an NPC, but a player spending 5,000 gold to cast this, and if the target succeeds, it just does 5d10 necrotic damage for a 9th level spell. I think running this as a DM, 5 out of 5. If you're using this as a player, 2 out of 5. The next spell, we have Wristpocket. 2nd level conjuration, ritual, so you can cast this as a ritual. Casting time 1 action, range self, duration, concentration up to 1 hour. You flick your wrist, causing one object in your hand to vanish. The object, which only you can be holding and can weigh no more than 5 pounds, is transported to an extra dimensional space where it remains for the duration. Until the spell ends, you can use your action to summon the object to your free hand, and you can use your action to return the object to the extra dimensional space. An object still in the pocket plane when the spell ends appears in your space at your feet. So you can use this to like smuggle small object if you're like in a well-guarded town. That's just something I could think of off the top of my head. Trying to hide small but important objects. This seems really flavorful. I don't really know the usefulness until I use this in play or see somebody else use this, but it's fun. It only costs a 2nd level, and you can cast it as a ritual to not use a spell slot, so I like it. 4 out of 5. And that is going to do it for the new spells in Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. Overall, some really, really powerful spells of this new Dunamancy Magic School. I'm definitely going to make a Dunamancy focused wizard as my next character just to try these out so I can get a better sense on how powerful these abilities are. If you guys have any thoughts on these spells or have used them in games already yourself, please leave them in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think. In the next video, we're going to be covering the brand new magic items featured in Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. So if you want to see that video, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, guys, happy gaming.